Welcome back to my channel, everybody. So what we're going to do today is just going to do more function practice. So if you haven't seen the first video, please go see that because then you won't be able to know what we're doing here. So what we're going to do is we're going to answer two types of function problems. So the first one is we're going to write a function that takes in one integer number, and we're going to print out if it's odd or even. And the second one is we're going to write a function to swap two int values, and we have to use pointers for this. So what I mean by that, we have one integer x that equals, let's say, 5, one integer y that equals 10. When I call my function, I want to swap those numbers. So x would equal 10 and y would equal 5. You have to really think about this because you can't have a return type because you're swapping two numbers. So for example, if we do a return type of integer, we're only returning one value where we can only change one value. So we have to be careful and we have to use pointers for this. So let's just start with the first one. So let's break it down. We want to take one integer number. So in our parameters, we want to take one integer number and we want to print out if it's odd or even. What kind of return type would we want to print? So we're not asking to return a value, so we want it to be of type void, and let's just call it print. We can just call it print. So what we have to do is we have to determine if it's odd or even. So how do we do this? We can do this a couple ways, but for me, I'm going to use the modulus operator. What this does, the modulus operator, I'll comment this, modulus operator. What this does, it determines if there is a remainder. So for example, if 8 modulus 2, that determines that the remainder is 0. But if it was 7 modulus 2, it would determine that there is a value of 1. What do I mean by that? 2 goes into 7 3 times, up to 6, right? It goes 2, 4, 6, and it can't divide into 7 anymore. So there would be one remaining value. But over here with 8, it goes into 8 4 times perfectly, and there is no remaining value. So this is very easy to determine odd or even. So what I want to do is x modulus 2, and for this part I want to do 0. So what this if function is pretty much writing out is this needs to be even. So if x is even, if the modulus of x is 0, that means it goes perfectly into the number. That means 2 goes perfectly into that number. We'll just write a cout statement saying this value is even. And anything else we will have as cout this value is odd. Alright, so let's try this out. Let's call this. We'll go down into the main function. Let's write int x equals 97. Now, remember this is a void function, so we're not storing any return data type, so I can just call it by its name and parameters. So its name is print underscore, and I'm going to feed it the value that I want to determine whether it's even or odd, and here I'm determining that it's x. Alright, and this alone should print out over here. Should print me out something. So 97 is odd, correct? What if I do, let's say, 100? This value is even, and just for last one, 17. So this should print out this value is odd. Perfect. All right, so that's our first function. If we look at it, all we have to know that's new is the modulus operator. All you know is that 2 goes into 8 perfectly, and that would equal to 0 because there's no remaining value. Or, for example, it's 7, there's 1 remaining value because 2 doesn't go into it perfectly. It's not spitting out the 3 or the 4 for like 4 times 2 equals 8. It's not spitting out that 4. It's just sending the remaining value. So that's what we pretty much have to do. Remember, we're not returning a type. We are just printing something out. We don't care to return a value back into the main function. So that's why we just call it by its name, right? Print, and we just feed it. We just feed it any variable that we have declared, like x or something like that. All right, let's move on to the next function. So moving on from the other function, our job is now to write a function to swap two int values, and we have to use pointers. So let's look at the function we need to write and break it down. Are we returning anything? Some of you might think we are returning something, but we're not, because we have to swap two integer values, but we can't return two numbers. We can only return one. So what we have to do is we actually have to create a function that finds these two values at their addresses by using pointers, change them there, and that's it. But we don't return anything. So it's going to be a void function. We're going to call it swap, and we are going to use pointers for this. So int, an integer pointer, and another integer pointer. So we're going to use the indirection operator to access the values at these addresses. So we're going to have a temporary variable that holds one of the values that we can change. So I'm just going to choose A. I'm going to use the indirection operator right here because this will access the value at the address. If I just had A, the value in temp would be an address, would be not the value that we want. So we need to use that indirection operator to access that value. And we're going to do the same thing with A and B. So what we're doing here is we're going to change the value at the address of A to equal B. So at this point right now, B and A are the same value. And now our last step is to use the indirection operator with B to change the value at address B. And we're going to equal it to temp because here we stored the first value. So it takes 3 steps to do this. Okay? So int x equals 5, y equals 10. And we're going to call this swap and x and y. Alright. And x and y. Alright, so let's see this. Let's see this run. There you go. Oops. So as you can see right here, our first value is x. So that corresponds to 10. Here, we can actually do this. We'll have 2 cout statements. There we go. So our first one is going to be, this is when x and y before the swap statement. We swap them, and now x equals 10 and y equals 5. So what we do is we use pointers to change the values at the address themselves, but we don't return a type back. So that's something very important. You always see the swap function, especially in low-level programming. You're just gonna know this. If you're gonna need to know this if you're doing this for school or something like that. Alrighty, guys. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for all my content.